Hi, I'm Steve Friedman with Rockstar Excel. Today we're going to talk about cleaning messy data. Sometimes you have data that looks like a complete mess. Maybe you copied it from a website, exported it from a poorly designed tool, or are working with a spreadsheet from someone who doesn't really know how to use Excel. Converting these into a format you can work with without having to manually retype everything is a mix of art and science. Your most important tools in cleaning data are filters, text to columns, find and replace, text functions such as left, right, len, trim, and the ampersand, if to handle inconsistencies, and your brain. I have 3 examples to walk you through some of the cleaning methods I use. These are from a longer video I'm working on for using Excel for fantasy football. But even if you don't care about fantasy football, hopefully you'll learn from the methods I use to clean things up. These are 3 sets of data I copied into Excel using the free version of Table Capture plugin for Chrome. Links to the original sources are in the video description. The first set of data I used is from a site called Fantasy Pros. So what are the problems with this? First, we've got these tiers here, and they're in the same column as the ranks. We've also got an extra row for each of the tiers, and we've got the player name and the team abbreviation in the same cell, and we would want those separated. We've also got this SOS season here, where there's just a whole bunch of repetitive text, when this should just be a single number. So my first tip is that the best way to clean data is to not have it be so messy in the first place. You'll usually have the best results using the Table Capture plugin rather than just copy-pasting off a website. The basic version of Table Capture is free, and I'm going to link to that in the post description. Now, when you're dealing with messy data, really when you're manipulating any sort of complicated spreadsheet, you always want to copy your raw data before you do anything. So you just right-click on the tab and go to click Create a Copy. And then let's just go ahead and we're going to rename this Fantasy Pros Working. And that way, if we mess anything up or we need to refer back to it, we still have our original data. Now, let's go ahead and just delete this top row because we don't need it. And then we're going to put a filter on this. If you're unfamiliar with filters, you should see my video on Filters Excel's Easy button, which I'll link to in the post description. I'm not counting this initial stuff as a step in cleaning up the data because this is basic stuff that you'll be doing for every spreadsheet you want to clean up. Now, we want to separate out this tier here from the ranking. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and add a column here, which I'll call tier, and I'm going to put a formula. So the formula I'm going to do is, starting down here, it'll do equals if left A2, comma 1, close parentheses, equals quote T. So what this is doing is it's looking one cell to the upper left and seeing if the leftmost character in that is a T. Then what I do is comma, right, parentheses, A2, comma 2, close parentheses. So what this does is if that cell to the upper left starts with a T, it's going to return the 2 rightmost characters. And I'm doing the 2 rightmost characters because if you scroll down here, you'll see that this tier, some of them are 2-digit numbers. But then there's one more trick I want to show you on this, which is if you are using text functions to pull numbers out of a text string, Excel is going to treat those numbers as text rather than numbers. So a way to give Excel a little kick and make it change it into a number is if you just go ahead and multiply the result by 1. So I'm going to do times 1. Then what I want to do is add another comma And I'm still inside my if function here. So this is telling Excel what to do if the upper left cell does not start with a T. Max, parentheses. I'm just going to go click on the cell one above here, so B2. And then I'm hitting F4, which is going to turn that into an absolute value, colon, and then I'm going to type B2 again, but I'm going to leave that as a relative value, and then close parentheses. And what this is doing is it's looking at every number that is above the cell in the column and is returning the largest number that it finds. And then I'm going to close parentheses again to end the if statement. So now, if I go ahead and fill this down, you can see that for everything that's in tier 1, it's returning a 1, and now here for tier 2, it's returning a 2, and for tier 3, and if I scroll all the way down to tier 14, it's returning a 14, and so on. And now that we've got all these tiers sorted out, we want to make sure that we don't ruin what we just did when we do more cleaning up of this spreadsheet. So let's just highlight this column and then copy, paste special, and paste value. You could also paste value by just going over to this little clipboard thing. Now we want to get rid of all of these extra rows in here. That's easy enough. We just go over to our filter here, and let's unselect everything, and then come down to the bottom and select here where it says Customize Tiers. And now it's just showing the rows that are blank that we want to get rid of. So we can just highlight them, and then do Delete Rows, and then we can remove our filter, and now all those blank rows are gone. So now we've got our ranks and tiers sorted. The next problem we want to deal with is here, where we've got the player name and the team abbreviation in the same cell. But the team abbreviations start with an open parentheses, which we can use to make life easier. We're going to do a text to columns to fix this. First, we want to go ahead and insert a blank column next to this. And then we highlight the column and we go to Data, Text to Columns, Delimited, and then select Other Delimiter. And for the delimiter, we're going to use an open parentheses. So now, we just click Next and Finish. And now it's separated these out. So let's go ahead and call this Team. Now we've got this extra closing parentheses here. So let's just highlight this column and go to Find and Select and choose Replace, and then put in close parentheses and replace it with nothing. So just do Replace All, and that cleans that up. We aren't quite done, because if you look at these player names here, if I were to highlight Christian McCaffrey, now, at the end of his name, there's an extra space. You can sort of see it. Now, that will cause problems because if I am, say, using a formula to search for his name, or if I have his name elsewhere and I tell Excel to check if it equals his name, Excel is going to think that's different because of the trailing space. To fix that, let's go ahead and add another column here. And we're going to use a trim function. So let's just say player name, and then we do equals trim. And what trim does is removes any spaces from the beginning or end of a text. So we just do trim D2, and then fill that down. And now the final thing we want to fix is this SOS season. And that's a very quick fix. We can just add another column here, say SOS season, make this column thinner. And then we'll just use a left function. So equals left, that, comma 1, and then times 1 to convert it to a number. And we fill that down. And then the final thing we want to do here to make this a little cleaner is we're going to go ahead and copy this tab again. And let's call this Fantasy Pros Final. And then what we want to do is just select all, copy, and then paste value. And now we can go through and just delete all the columns that we aren't using. So let's delete, I don't even know what this WSID is, it's just false for everyone. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of the player names that have an extra space in them. Let's get rid of this SOS season that's all long. Now we've got this in a usable format. Now, often if I was cleaning up data, I might go ahead and separate out the first and last names, but all three of these sheets have the first and last name in the same form, so I'm not going to do that. I actually have made another video on standardizing names where I show how to do that, which I will link to in the video description. So to summarize, the methods I used were the text functions left and right, an if statement, max, which returns the maximum of a group of numbers, multiplying by 1 to convert a number stored as text into a number, filters, text to columns, find and replace, trim, which removes leading and trailing spaces, and then finally copy-paste value. So now let's move on to the next spreadsheet, which is from Yahoo Sports. Now the problems here, if you look each of these cells here, they start with either player note or no new player notes. That's information I want to get rid of. We've got the player name, the team abbreviation, and the position all in the same cell. And then each cell also ends with this scheduling information, and that's information we don't need and just want to get rid of. So once again, the first thing we want to do is copy this tab so we aren't ruining our raw data. Let's go ahead and rename this Yahoo Sports Working. Now let's get rid of this player note and no new player notes garbage. So I'm going to highlight this column and then go to find and select and do replace. And then I'm going to put in no new player notes with a space at the end, because notice there's a space between that and the name. And I'm going to replace that with nothing and then do replace all. And then I'm going to put in player note with a space at the end and replace that with nothing. Now, the next thing we want to do is find a delimiter that we could use for text to columns. This hyphen here between the team name and the position looks like a good candidate, but there's a problem with that. So if I scroll down here, you see there's Clyde Edwards-Hilaire there. He has a hyphen in his name, and probably other people do as well. That's just one I found with a quick visual scan. So if I were to use hyphen as a delimiter in the text to columns, that would cause some problems. So what I want to do first is replace the space hyphen space with something else. So I'm going to highlight this and then go to find replace, and I'm going to put in space hyphen space and replace that with a % sign, because I know there's no % sign showing up anywhere in this column. And then replace all. And now I want to go ahead and add a new column here, and then go to data, text to columns, and delimited. And now I'm going to use another delimiter, and I'm going to use a % sign as the delimiter. And finish. And so now this column has been split up where we've got one column with the player name and team abbreviation, and another column with the position, and then this scheduling garbage that I don't need. Next, let's split up the player name and team abbreviation. One wrinkle here, the team abbreviation can be 2 or 3 letters. So you see here it's CAR, and here it's NO. But that's okay, we can still handle that. I'm going to go ahead and add a bunch of extra columns here. And then for the team abbreviation, we are going to use the right function. So I'm going to say equals right A2, comma 3. This is grabbing the 3 rightmost characters from this text. And then I'll go ahead and fill this down. So for the 3-letter team abbreviations, it's fine. But for the 2-letter ones, there's a space before it. That's easy enough to clean up because we can just use the trim function. So equals trim B2, and then just fill that down. So now we've got our team abbreviation. Next, we want to get the player names out. So if the team is the last 3 characters of the string, then the player name is going to be everything except the last 3 characters of the string. So first what we want to do is count how many characters are in the string, which Excel can do with the len function. So we do equals len a2, and fill that down. And now if we do equals left a2, comma, the number of characters that are in the string minus 3. And then once again, we want to do a trim on that to fix the ones that have an extra space at the end. So equals trim and fill that down. Now, I did this in several steps to make it clearer what I was doing, but you could also combine all of this into one formula. Equals trim left a2, comma, len a2, close parentheses, minus 3, close parentheses, close parentheses. Fill that down, and it will give you the same result as what I did, taking a few separate steps. Finally, we want to pull out the positions from this column. Now, if you scroll down, you'll see that most of them are 2 letters, but some are 1 and some are 3. So we don't want to just use the left function, but we can just do this with a text to column. So let's just add a bunch of columns here and then go to data, text to columns, and then let's get rid of this and make the delimiter a space and finish. And now we've got a bunch of garbage here that we don't need, but the position is going to be the first column here. This looks like a huge mess because we've got a bunch of columns we don't need, but if we just go ahead and copy this tab, and let's call this Yahoo Sports Final, and then copy paste value. And now we can just go through and delete all the columns that are unnecessary. And here we go. Now we've got this cleaned up and usable spreadsheet. To review, the methods we used here were find and replace, text to columns with the substitute character as a delimiter, left, right, trim, and len. The next spreadsheet to clean up is from ESPN. Now in this one, you have this weird problem I've never seen before, where when I imported the data, the name was repeated 3 times. Although not for everyone. If you look at Trevor Lawrence here, it was only repeated twice. Also, some have this random Q at the end. It's just inconsistent and super weird. And also, you've got the team name and the position in the same cell as we saw previously. So once again, let's go ahead and copy the raw data. Call this ESPN working. And then let's go ahead and put a filter on this. And then I'm going to add just a whole bunch of columns in here. And then what I'm going to do is do text to columns using space as a delimiter. And this is going to make a huge mess. It's going to make things worse before it makes things better, but this is a necessary step. So if you look here, things are in different columns. It's hard to find anything, but we can clean this up. What we want to do is find the last column that has any data in it. So we can just look at the filters and see here, column M has someone's position, column N does not. So now we want to find for each row how many cells actually have any text in them. So we go to the first column that doesn't have any data in it. So one past the last cell that does have data in it. So over here in column N, and we're going to use count A. So what count A does is count non-blank cells in a range. So I do equals count A, parentheses, and then I'm going to select the range from B3 to M3, and then I am going to fill this down to the bottom. And I'm also going to go ahead and do that just to make it a little easier to work with. Now I want to see the most names anyone has. And what I mean by that is most people have a first and last name, but some people have a 3-word name. They may have a junior in their name or a 2-word first name. Possibly some people have 4 or more words in their name. So I am going to use this filter here based on how many cells have text in them in this row. And I'm going to look at the people who have 11 or 12. And I'm just manually looking at this now to see if anyone has more than 3. And it looks like no one does. So 3 is the largest number of words that appear in a name in this data set. So let's go ahead and get rid of this filter for now. Now to get the player name, what we'll do is say equals B3 for the first name and quote space quote. And by the way, I made a video on using the ampersand, which I will link to in the video description. Then we're going to do C3, then and now what we're going to do is say if, and then we're going to see if the third name equals the first name. And if it does, then we're just going to add nothing to the end. But if the third name is different from the first name, we're going to put a space by putting quote space quote, and then and we'll put the third name there too. So let's go ahead and fill this down. And now let's go ahead and look at some of the longer names here and make sure this worked right. And yeah, it did work right. So here for the 3-word names, we've captured it correctly. Now we know that the team and position are the last 2 columns that have any data in them. And we know how many columns have data in them from our count A formula. So we can use an index formula to put all of the information into one column. So let's go ahead and call this team, and then we'll do equals index, and let's just go ahead and highlight this range from B3 to M3, comma, and then 1, because it's row 1, the range only has 1 row. And then the column number is going to be here, N3, which is the count of how many have data in them, and then -1, because the team name is in the second to last column that has data. And you see here, it's returning BUF, which is the team. And if I fill down, you see it's returning the team for all of them, even if they're in different columns. And I can do the same thing for the position. So I do equals index, parenthesis, and B3 to M3, comma 1, comma, and here I'm just going to select N3 without the -1 because we're looking at the last cell that has data, and then fill that in. And then finally we just copy the tab and we'll call this ESPN final, and we copy and paste value. And we can just delete all of the information we no longer need. So we'll go back, get rid of all of this junk, and we've got good stuff, and here we go. Now we have everything on its own column. So to summarize, the methods we used here were text to columns, count A, filter, if, and index, as well as the ampersand. So this was 3 different examples of cleaning messy data. Do you have any data that you would like cleaned up? Please let me know, because I'd like to make this into a series, and I'd like real examples of data to work with. Please like and subscribe and check out rockstarexcel.com. Our Excel Made Easy class typically runs every other month. You can also sign up for our newsletter for tips on using Excel to make your life easier, submit questions for a future video, and to book a free consultation on how we can save you time and money. Also, watch for my video on using Excel for fantasy football, which I should be releasing shortly. I'll update the video description with a link to that once that's out. Thanks for watching and stay tuned so we can help make you an Excel rockstar.